So just to put this in context, as if you don't already know, what's happened is over the last 5-7 days, these protests have been increasing in might to the point where yesterday it looked like the reports were that over a million people went into the main square. Think about our country. I always like to compare to our country. Do we even have a place where 1 million people could fill in? Times Square couldn't fit 1 million people. There's no way. But anyway, this is this giant plaza, this giant piazza in the middle of Cairo, and million people or more were there by the square foot. They certainly looked like lots and lots and lots of people. And now the camels came in and the horses come in, and now we see fire and we see violence and we have reports of injuries and of deaths. And it's just not unsurprising because Mubarak didn't want to cede power. He said, I'll make a compromise with you. I'll step down in September, but I'm not being hounded out of my country. I don't want to leave with my tail between my legs. I am not the kind of a leader that some of these African leaders were that has to go live in squalor and splendor at the same time and be ostracized from my homeland and my country. I deserve better than that. The military was supporting him in the sense that he appointed a vice president who was a general, Suleiman, who said, I will help in an orderly transition as vice president. I will take the place of Mubarak until September. Apparently not good enough for people. And there is so much uncertainty there. And this is spreading throughout the Arab world. And of course, from the vantage point of the United States, of Israel, this is of tremendous concern because depending upon who will step into the void of power, that will determine the stability or instability of the region. There are reports now where people are saying, given the instability of this and Asia and India and Pakistan, this is setting the stage for another nuclear confrontation, a nuclear, shall we say, arms race that could result in irresponsible people with their fingers on the trigger. There's, look what might happen in general to oil prices with the instability of the region. And of course, the biggest analogy that's being played out, and this again is the worst case scenario, is that much like what happened in 1979, there was a great cartoon about it if you saw it, a political cartoon. In 1979, there were many people who thought that the revolt of the Shah of Iran was a good thing, because the Shah of Iran was a dictator. He was perceived as a tyrant by a lot of people. And of course, Americans being we're very naive in some ways. We're very gullible in some ways. Our national conscience is such that as a national conscience, we have a knee-jerk approach to wanting more people to have more human rights. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But it doesn't mean that we really understand the way other cultures work. And that's a bad thing. So what happened in Iran is that there was a void, there was a vacuum, and the Shah of Iran was overthrown. And in the first days, heady days of that, there were people of goodwill who thought that we will replace him with something that will be better and fairer for all people. But it didn't work out that way, because the Ayatollah Khomeini stepped in and imposed a fundamentalist Islamist rule on Iran from which it has not emerged yet in the last 30 years. And which has held its people in darkness. And last June, when there was a groundswell, an uprising in Tehran, the United States stood by and really didn't do much. In fact, we were accused of doing nothing, while people of real goodwill wanted to upend the existing 30-year regime. So now we are also standing by and watching, but we are quietly, maybe not so quietly, behind the scenes, President Obama seeming to encourage what he calls an orderly transition, but assuming as a fait accompli that Mubarak is out. And the question is, just because he's out, does it mean that what will replace him, who will replace him, will make it better for the Egyptian people? Because when you have a vacuum of leadership, that's when you have people that are organized agitators step in and take it over. And that's what the Muslim Brotherhood is poised to do if there isn't a competing legitimate claim on the Egyptian people. So that's the great worry, and that's the great imponderable question right now as we watch and see what happens. I'm curious to know why there hasn't been some kind of a leadership other than Mubarak who has been able to step up in front of the people and say, here is how we should make peace with the outgoing regime. I think in the absence of real leadership, you're going to have this kind of violence. And then what happens with the violence is that becomes its own reason to quell the protesters, and then the army will have to take sides. And the army is going to have a very difficult question to ask itself, because either they're going to stay on the side of the people, or they're going to stay on the side of Mubarak and enforce quote-unquote law and order, and then they'll be hated too. So meantime, I'm watching Nightfall in Cairo. If you have your television sets handy or you want to watch TV tonight, I'm sure that you will be seeing these scenes replayed and again and again, of what appear to be fires in the main square. And I don't know that they're controlled fires or uncontrolled fires, but it's not a pretty sight. Not at all. I'm not an oracle. I can only tell you that I'm reading widely and deeply about this, and the only thing that I can conclude is that I don't think Mubarak was nearly as bad as who could come after him in terms of the living of the Egyptian people. The Ayatollah Khomeini, on a scale of 1 to 10, is far worse than a Hosni Mubarak in terms of keeping the lid on the people and in terms of imposing a way of law and lifestyles that is incredibly regressive and restrictive for the Egyptian people. A lot of the Egyptians like to think of themselves as enlightened, educated people who want to be part of a wider democratic marketplace, a wider world, not an insular world. I hope that those people reign. I hope that those people do reign. And I hope that those people gather their power and still adhere to the peace treaty that was made with Israel. That's my hope. Because stability above all. A peace is still a peace. A cold peace is better than no peace at all. And it's scary. My son Jonathan just came home from Israel this morning, and he told me about, and I didn't see this 3 years ago, he said it was brand new. So Israel, if you know your map, is surrounded on the north by two borders at the very tip of Israel. To the right is Syria, to the left is Lebanon. To the left, Lebanon, Hezbollah has constructed a city with red roofs. They want themselves to be known. That is a city without people. It is a fake city. And nobody inhabits it, and it has no windows. It has holes for guns instead. It's built as a little fortress that looks like houses. And because of the elevation, they are in fact higher than the people of Israel that they look down on from that perch. Now, that city wasn't there 3 years ago. I was there in 2006. Wait, was it 3 years ago now? It's almost 4 years ago. 4 years ago. I was there in 2006. I was there the day before war broke out. I was literally on one of the last planes out. And I didn't know it at the time because war broke out so quickly. But that city is there because Hezbollah is making very concerted plans to do a war on Israel. And they're going to do it from there in Lebanon. Syria has never made a secret of its enemy to try and eradicate Israel. Jordan is going to go through its own changes now in order to respond to the public pressure against Israel. Today it was announced that Hamas and Fatah hate each other. You know that they've been accused, and it's been proven that they've committed political prisoner war acts of terror on each other. So much for loving your brethren Muslims. Anyway, Hamas has decided that in response to the Palestinian Authority, which is also known as Fatah, Palestinian Authority wanted to hold elections in response to the wave in the Arab world, and Hamas said absolutely not. They're going to boycott the elections. They don't want any elections in Gaza. There were an awful lot of tensions within the Arab world. The Arabs would have you believe that Israel is their biggest problem. I guarantee if Israel disappeared tomorrow off the face of the map, God forbid, they'd find other reasons to hate each other. They didn't need Israel to hate each other before 1948. If you look at your history, they had plenty of problems with each other. But it's very convenient. It's very convenient to hate Israel. And I again and again say, you want to learn history, you've got to learn geography. History and geography go hand in hand. You look at a map, I'll look at the same map as you, and I'll say to myself, and you'll say to yourself, why are they making such a big deal over a little state of Israel? Look how much land they already have.